Hello, I'm Sam Segal.
And I'm Harrison Pulewski.
And we're here with Channel Pi News.
Today is April 6th, the 142nd anniversary of the founding of the Museum of Natural History.
Yes, and today we have a special on that very museum, as presented by our own field reporter, Ari Friedman.
Thank you, Sam and Harrison. For our first presentation, we will look at a series of pictures representing the progression of the museum. This is the museum when it had just been founded. It was based in the Central Park Armory. It had minimal exhibits, which included North American birds and several collections from wealthy Europeans. This is the museum's first building, which they moved into after they left the Central Park Armory. The architects of the building designed a massive, impressive structure, but the founders had only raised enough money to build this more modest building. This is the museum in 1900. As you can see, it has grown significantly from 1869 to this point. The limited original exhibits have now expanded, and the museum also includes a large department of anthropology. By 1950, the museum had built several mammal diorama exhibits. This is today's American Museum of Natural History. The museum has grown from a modest building into a global center of learning and science. The museum's 40-plus exhibits represent a huge increase from the original few exhibits. This museum is also a school of learning, which has permission from the state of New York to give PhDs and other graduate degrees. Now, here's a message from our sponsors. So, I hear you come alive at night. You're so funny.
And coming up next, Ari is brought forward in time museum founders Albert S. Bickmore, the man who thought of the museum, and Theodore Roosevelt Sr., a man who helped get the museum off the ground and is also the father of our nation's 26th president.
Thank you, Sam and Harrison. As you heard, I'm here with Albert S. Bickmore and Theodore Roosevelt. So, Albert, may I call you Albert?
Of course.
So, what was your inspiration behind the creation of the museum?
Since I was a boy, I always enjoyed observing and learning about my natural surroundings. I was also inspired by my Harvard professor, Louis Agassiz, who is a great zoological scientist.
How did Dr. Agassiz inspire you?
Dr. Agassiz founded his own zoological museum, and it inspired me to create one of my own.
Well, Albert, what caused you to choose New York as your location for the museum?
Well, there are many other cities around the world that also have their own zoological museums, and there is no such one in New York. There are also quite a few wealthy investors that would be willing to fund such an endeavor.
Thank you. So, Theodore.
No, call me Mr. Roosevelt.
What position did you have on the founding of the museum?
Well, I was a leader on the committee that gathered funds to found the museum, and I was also a leader on the committee to design the museum's actual building. As well, the museum charter was written and agreed upon in my very own home.
How much money was originally raised for the museum?
Originally, we raised $44,500, of which I myself contributed $1,000.
Other than securing a location for the museum, how was that money spent?
It was spent on our first exhibits that we purchased, namely a collection of indigenous birds to the North American region, and various collections belonging to wealthy European nobility.
Mr. Roosevelt, what building did the museum first occupy?
It first occupied the Central Park Armory, right in the middle of the park. However, that building was not adequate for a large and growing museum.
And why was it not appropriate?
It was merely too small. It didn't provide our museum opportunity to grow and become a great center of science and learning.
So, Mr. Bickmore, after moving from the Central Park Armory, where did the museum go next?
We secured a small parcel of land on the edge of Central Park, and we decided to build there.
Can you please detail the construction process?
Well, we secured that parcel of land in 1872 and promptly hired architect Calvert Vaux, who had designed Central Park itself, along with architect J. Ray Mould, to design a new grand museum building. This one would allow us to grow and house all of our exhibits.
What happened next?
Well, in 1874, President Ulysses S. Grant laid the cornerstone for what would become one of the greatest museums in the world. Then, about 3 years and a half later, President Rutherford B. Hayes presided over the ceremony to open the museum's new building.
In fact, I led President Hayes on a guided tour of the building. He was incredibly pleased.
How did you get government approval for the building of the museum?
A friend of mine told William Tweed, the New York political leader, about my situation. I then spoke to Tweed. He assured me that he would get my museum approved by the state government. And Tweed followed through on his promise. The bill for the museum passed the state legislature immediately.
Who were the first presidents of the museum?
John David Wolfe and Robert L. Stewart, two of the museum's founders, were the first two presidents of the museum.
Their terms wound up being short-lived, and Morris K. Jessup took over after them and led the museum into a golden age.
Thank you so much for your time, gentlemen. Now we head back to Sam and Harrison in the studio.
Now, Channel Pie News will present a report on some of the founders of this great museum.
Albert S. Bickmore was a Harvard-educated man who was very interested in the natural world. He was inspired by a Harvard professor to start his own museum, so he went to New York and gathered up many wealthy New Yorkers to fund this museum.
J.P. Morgan was the founder of J.P. Morgan and Company, which is today part of J.P. Morgan Chase. Morgan donated $500 for the founding of the museum, which is today equivalent to $8,088.24. He was among the many wealthy New Yorkers recruited by Bickmore to help found his museum.
Theodore Roosevelt Sr. was another critical founder of the museum. He donated $1,000 for the museum's founding and was an important leader for the museum. He spearheaded the fundraising effort for the museum and was also on the committee for designing the museum's building.
Joseph Choate was a successful lawyer and diplomat. In addition to an acclaimed legal career, Choate served as the ambassador to England, which is considered the most prestigious ambassadorship for an American. Choate was an original trustee and creator of the American Museum of Natural History.
Here's an exaggerated reenactment over the design for the museum's building, particularly its size. It is presented by some of our local historians representing Theodore Roosevelt Sr. and Calvert Vaux. Calvert, come here. I have to show you the museum.
What is this, a center for ants?
This is what we can afford given our current budget.
Theodore, J. Ray Mold and I have designed a grand museum for your usage.
I'm sorry, but we'll just have to deal with this design.
But you and your fellow founders wanted an impressive museum, and so that's what we've designed.
Calvert, this isn't optional. This is what we can afford.
Very well. I'll just have to design a small building. Now, wasn't that great? Now we head to a presentation about the museum's first exhibits.
When the museum was founded in 1869, the donations that they received for exhibits were very limited.
It was mostly made up of animal specimens donated by various wealthy individuals.
It includes several donations of insects and other bugs, in addition to the donation of foreign animals by several U.S. diplomats, including the U.S. ambassador to Malta.
Other exhibits donated included an exhibit on geology of Israel and Palestine, as donated by A.L. Rawson.
Also donated were several exhibits of minerals and wood, and they were displayed by the museum.
The museum has truly come a long way from 1869. Now for all of us at Channel Pie News, have a great day.
And we'll see you all tomorrow.